Hello and welcome to this video in which we are going to analyze some of the movements of the technique of the late great Paco de Lucia. This is the second video I've made in this series. The first one was on the technique of John Williams, and I'm really enjoying it so far. Feel free to chime in the comments if you have opinions on these things that we're going to talk about, or some insight, or maybe you know these people personally and you can shine a light on what exactly is going on here in these instances that we're going to study. The main purpose of these videos is, of course, educational. And I have to say, it's so much fun going over this footage and analyzing it, looking it over in slow motion, doing things like counting and trying to figure out finger patterns and crazy things like that. It's so much fun. And, unfortunately, I'll never get to meet somebody like Paco de Lucia because he's already passed. But it doesn't mean that we can't learn simply from just watching. I mean, of course, listening, but even just watching. The clips you're going to see today, most of them don't contain any audio. So we're just analyzing the way that people's hands look and people's hands move. And it's amazing to me how much we can learn by simply doing that, especially when you look at great musicians such as Paco de Lucia. And although for myself, I'm predominantly a classical guitarist. I play in the classical style. Since he's playing a nylon string guitar, there's plenty of things that I think that you can take away if you play nylon string, no matter what kind of style that you play. And even if you play a different instrument, like electric guitar or a different instrument altogether, the efficiency of his movements and the natural flow that you can see him exemplify are things that I think anybody can take away. So I want to start here with looking at something very basic in fingerstyle guitar playing, but oh so important: the basic free stroke hand position. So we've got some clips here of good shots of Paco de Lucia's plucking hand as he's doing free stroke passages, and I've slowed down some of the footage so we can kind of try and see what the different joints are doing. Now, at first glance, I look at this type of hand position and I think, well, this looks pretty different from a standard classical guitar type of free stroke hand position. And I say that because the fingers are much more curled than you would typically see in classical guitar. In classical guitar, you typically have more extension of the fingers. But upon analyzing the joints, here's what I see going on here. And it's funny because I mentioned the last video of the series was on John Williams. His free stroke technique has a lot of things in common with Paco de Lucia's. So the joint activity here to me looks like this. It looks like both the big joint and the middle joint are heavily involved in the plucking of the string. Because you can see his middle joint go up and in toward his palm. Maybe even the tip joint is being utilized there as well. After the stroke, you get this similar type of lift that we saw with John Williams' hand, where the big joint kind of puts the finger back in place. And it looks like he's using everything that he can, all three joints of the fingers, to get this powerful attack. As far as the fingers being as curled as they are, it looks like it gives a stronger pull kind of up from the string and into the palm. Of course, Paco de Lucia had very long fingers, but he really is using everything that he has to bolster his free stroke technique by the looks of it. Here's something that I found while I was looking at his free stroke hand position, and if you watch these videos, you're going to find a common theme of me pointing out things that break the quote-unquote rules, because I kind of love it when that happens, especially when amazing guitarists do things that you are supposedly not supposed to do, and they not only do them, but they get these amazing results that you can't get otherwise. So if you've studied a lot of classical guitar like I have, you're not allowed to move that much. I mean, I'm kind of joking, but kind of not. You're allowed to move to make sound, but any more than that, you're just not allowed. You're not allowed to move the guitar. A lot of people say you're not allowed to move your plucking hand. You got to keep it in the same place. and people have their reasons for that. But this just really fascinated to me. He's playing this, I think it's a Granadinas type of piece. So you get these common flamenco arpeggios where you have AMI, and then you do big heavy rest stroke or apoyando A finger accents. So that's the type of passage that he's doing. But when he does these accents, he moves the guitar forward. This just totally fascinated me. So when he hits one of these big A finger accents, you see the guitar jerk forward. And I have to assume that's part of his A finger accent technique. What a big no-no on display, but what amazing results. And I'm not sure if he's jerking it with his fretboard hand, he may be, or if it's with his body. But in these shots, you can clearly see the guitar jumping forward. And I think when you watch it in slow motion, it makes it all the more apparent how much it moves. Maybe this is something that flamenco players do that I just haven't noticed before, but this is one of the first times I have ever seen it, and he's doing a live performance here in front of an audience, so you have to assume that this is just the way that he plays the guitar. Now, one of my favorite things about Paco de Lucia, especially as I got more into guitar playing, is he is absolutely balanced. You know, I first learned about him because he plays amazing sounding scales. So I thought, oh, he's the scale guy, you know. And then as I got more into flamenco music and more into his guitar playing, it's like, oh, he can also do amazing stuff with his thumb and arpeggios and all this kind of stuff. But he has one of the best fretboard hands of all time. I mean, so I just wanted to show some footage here of him just being so disciplined with his fretboard hand. And by disciplined, I just mean all his fingers are perfectly curled. He doesn't shoot out any unnecessary fingers. And look at these complicated passages he's playing that require slurs and quick shifts, and it's just as easy looking as it could be. Occasionally you see his fourth finger kind of drift a little bit far away than might be necessary, but it certainly does not get in the way of his technique. And whenever he makes a buzz, it's always a right hand buzz. So it's always a buzz that he means to make due to the action and due to his attack, or at least that's my assumption. Because his left hand is so accurate and so powerful, the buzzes are not coming from the left hand. That's totally clean. I mean, look at this passage here. He goes from a really stretchy upper position chord that I'm sure I wouldn't even be able to fret, through some bar chords, and then through a very complicated slur passage, and then all the way back up to another bar chord, just like it's absolutely nothing. Perfectly disciplined fretboard hand technique that, you know, I kind of feel like he didn't get enough credit for. He was so great at everything that it's one of the least flashy things I guess he probably did. But when you hear him play his music, you definitely hear the benefits of such an amazing fretboard hand. So here we have some pretty good camera angles, the best that I could find, of Paco de Lucia playing vicious apoyando or rest stroke scales. Now, how could you talk about Paco de Lucia and not talk about his rest stroke scales? Basically, the best I've ever heard in terms of speed, aggression, and musicality. Now, I don't know too much about flamenco style scales, but there's two different things I just want to talk about here. The first is the angle of the finger to the string and kind of the hand position that makes that angle. And then the second is the plucking hand thumb. But back to the first point here for a bit. Look at the angle of attack that his index finger in particular has as he gets into his apoyando position. And I'm looking at the angle mainly from the middle joint down. That is just a brutal angle for the string. As he presses in, it is just going to be a very heavy attack. So it looks like an absolutely perfect setup. And then, you know, I've always kind of figured that he played scales mainly from the middle joint down because that's how it looked to me. But upon getting these good camera angles and watching it in slow motion, it definitely looks like to me that he's using the big joints as well, because you see the movement of that big part of the finger. So it looks like each finger is in its kind of set position, and then he uses the big joint to move the finger, and I can only guess and maybe say middle joints and tip joints for control. But I was surprised here to find how much big joint he uses in his scales. Now let's talk about his plucking hand thumb. So as he goes down the strings, usually when he starts the scale on the upper strings, his thumb is kind of flat, not flexed. As he goes down the strings, looks like maybe to the 3rd to 4th string. Okay, now he's flexed his thumb. And I can't really tell how far the thumb knuckle is kind of pushing into the top of the guitar, although sometimes it really looks like that it is. Here's the best shot I could find where he is doing this type of technique, and it's very, very aggressive. It's during a very loud, very fast Bulardias passage. So from the clips that I can find, it looks like as Paco de Lucia goes down through the bass strings, and as he needs more volume and more viciousness in general, it looks like he flexes that plucking hand thumb, maybe putting it against the top of the guitar and using that as some kind of leverage. It looks like when he's on the treble strings, the upper strings, he apparently doesn't need to do that. Maybe he's got leverage by pushing on that 6th string, and I think that's something you can see here. As he comes down the strings and he lifts his thumb, you see that 6th string move. So that looks to me like he was pressing down on it. So maybe if there's no string to press down, now he just has to press somewhere else and then uses that thumb. But you see him do this basically every time he's going to play a scale. When he goes down to the bass strings, he will flex that thumb, and he gets into that position so fast and so naturally. So this is just a quick shot, but a good angle that shows what he might be doing with his fretboard hand thumb. And it doesn't look like it's, in any kind of really crazy position. Most of the time it seems to be lined up with either his 1st or 2nd finger. But it does move quite a bit. It moves all over the back of the neck. It will move vertically, it will move horizontally. So you can see him utilizing his thumb. Okay, so right here is definitely a personal fascination of mine. I've been watching this video for years. I've watched it, dozens and dozens of times. It's one of my favorite Paco de Lucia performances, and he's not even playing his own piece. He's playing Impetu by Mario Escudero, although I think it's an awesome piece. And it's funny, he just looks bored while he's playing this piece. It looks like he can just play this type of music in his sleep. And so he's looking at the camera, he's looking around. There's one passage in the middle where he diligently studies the fingerboard. So that must have been a, less easy than normal type of passage for him. But I just love this performance. At the end, you have this long sequence of rasgueado. So he does a bunch of different kinds of stuff. He ends the passage in what feels to me like a group of 6 feel for the rasgueado. So it's like like that. So it sounds like it's in a group of 6. Now, if you study rasgueado, a good thing to do, although it's more difficult, but it makes for good study, is to take a pattern and practice it in a different group than it naturally occurs in. So the pattern he's using here is down with C, A, M, I, and then up with I. So that's a 5 grouping, a group of 5. So it's more challenging to practice that same pattern in maybe a group of 3 or maybe a group of 4. You put the accents on different fingers and you strengthen the pattern. Now I would assume when you play music, most people would pick the rasgueado combination that most closely matches the grouping that occurs in the music. In other words, in this passage at the end, it's a grouping of 6. So you would think he would pick a rasgueado pattern that naturally happens in a group of 6, but he doesn't. So not only is he playing an amazing sounding rasgueado, but he chooses a pattern that's even more difficult than a pattern that naturally occurred in the same grouping as the music. Does this make sense? So he's using a 5-finger pattern, but he's making it sound like a group of 6. And that just totally blows my mind. So I slowed this down and I counted it out. And here's what I see. So I found 7 patterns of down with C, A, M, I, and up with I. But that leaves you a couple strokes short. You have one more stroke that completes the measure, and then the next stroke is the downbeat. So he ends on the downbeat. So 7 times he does down with C, A, M, I, up with I. And then for those last 2 strokes, he does down with A and down with I. And that just really blew my mind. You know, in studying his playing, it is certainly difficult to identify his movements and what they're doing. It's just another level that you've just never seen before, you've never experienced. So even though you're seeing it, it's been hard for me to say, what is exactly going on here? And when I would see him play this passage, something in my brain would just say, it's almost like something going against something else. What I saw didn't match what I heard. And sure enough, analyzing this pattern, even though it happens in a group of 6 in the music, he uses a physical pattern that's a group of 5, and he makes it sound just as great as if it were a group of 6. So this is like behind the scenes stuff. You're gonna hear him play this piece and you're just gonna think, wow, this sounds great. He must have picked all the easiest ways to do everything, but that's not the case. Who knows why he chose a group of 5 over a naturally occurring group of 6 here, but it doesn't matter. He just shows he can make any pattern sound basically the way that he wants, and it's absolutely amazing. So this last clip that we're going to look at here is of him playing the very famous Aranjuez Concerto. And I love the fact that he played this piece. He played it in its entirety. I heard through word of mouth that he didn't read music, so he actually had a guitarist who knew this concerto teach it to him by rote. I think that's absolutely amazing, and just a demonstration of the lengths that he's willing to go. If you've studied guitar, you've probably studied economy of movement. I mentioned it a little bit earlier about, you don't want to move too much. I kind of made a joke about it being overly accentuated, but it is true. You don't want to move too much, and you only need to move as much as you need to produce the sounds. So this is the climax of the second movement, the Adagio, and you've got these super loud chords being played way up on the fingerboard of the guitar, and it says raschiato in the score, so you're just supposed to play the heck out of these chords. Now, if you listen to the way they sound, you might assume he's flailing his hand, his wrist, his arm maybe even, wildly all over the place, because you would have to, right? To get these amazingly loud raschiato sounds, you would have to move that much. But look at how little he moves. It just almost doesn't make any sense. But this is someone that clearly understands how to put energy into the guitar and how to have every bit of energy that you put there come back out. And I can't even really tell what plucking hand technique he's using, but it's amazing to me that so little movement is required. And you'll see this in all of his guitar playing. It's just the absolute most fine-tuning of a movement, but this dude just does not waste energy on the guitar. And this is the best example of that I can find. The movements are so refined, so directed, so specifically directed, that it just looks like he's not moving very much at all. That being said, when you look at his forearm and how his plucking hand moves back and forth, you get some feel of the viciousness that's happening there. It's not that there's less power, it's just that it's very specifically put. It definitely is there, and it's coming out. So you can kind of see, I think, the extreme force that he is using kind of come out in those areas in the wrist and in the forearm. But absolutely amazing display of technique, and again, something that'll just kind of get right by you if you don't stop and look at it and try to see what's going on. So thank you very much for watching. That's all that we're going to talk about here. I could go on, and hopefully there will be time and a place in the future to come back and look at some more Paco de Lucia footage because it's just so enjoyable. I am a classical guitarist and teacher in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas. If you'd like to contact me about lessons, I'll leave links all around for that. I also have an online guitar community that I've created. It doubles as my Patreon page, but I call it the A Guitar Community, where I have a lot of instructional videos. I also have several courses that I offer there that are not very expensive. And I'm also a composer, so I'll leave links around to my music for solo fingerstyle guitar if you'd like to check that out. Thanks again for watching. Have a wonderful day.